I was reading the messages left by Jo Jo Dullard's family about the Easter weekend and how they miss her any time of year. There's a sort of a celebration that I suppose family get together. People who have a loved one missing, presumed murdered. I'm sure it, no matter, they say time heals. I'm not sure it does if they remain missing. Now, her on the Facebook page dedicated to her, it reads, I think this is written by her sister, Jo, I know you're surrounded by Mary, Tom, Mum, Dad, and one of your best friends, Esther, this Easter. I still have a vivid memory of you and your mum baking buns in the kitchen while Bare Necessities from the Jungle Book plays in the background. I hope you're giggling with everyone up in heaven, just like you were then. And then an appeal to the public, wherever you are today, I hope you pause and think of Jo, who's still not finished her journey home to us. To be able to lay her to rest besides Mam is all we want. Please come forward with any information you have, no matter how small or insignificant you may think it is. Every piece is important in finding Jo and bringing her home. Easter is a time of hope, and we will never give up hope that you will finally make it home. So JoJo's sister Mary Phelan had championed her cause for years and years, keeping this case alive and in the public, and undoubtedly it had a huge toll on her. And another sister, Kathleen, has taken up the mantle, and the family are still running this Facebook page and all the rest of it. 1995 when she went missing, and it just reminded me really of, because we have just completed the Crime World Presents Evil Eye podcast series, which is available now. But of course, that's focused on the sister of Emer O'Loughlin, and it's Pam O'Loughlin. And she describes in detail, I suppose, the toll that's taken on her to be the one to have kept pushing her sister's case out, looking for that information, hoping that someday they'll open a Facebook page and there will be that little crumb that will see them get justice. It's kind of like a life sentence for the family, and it's incredible that in both these cases it's sisters really who have stood up to do it.
Of course, because JoJo's mother did pass away, as she refers to there. So it falls to that younger generation. It's incredible how
it was JoJo's older sister. Was Mary not her older sister? Yeah.
But her
oh, sorry, I know what you mean. It falls to the generation under the parents. The siblings.
Yeah, it falls to the siblings really to keep it going, especially in these long-term cases. And I think that the lack of a body in this case is really, really distressing for the family. You can see this with the cases that have disappeared in the north, how much of a burden that is on the family. The Jo Jo Dullard case is slightly different in that there did look like there was, there could be a break last year when a man was arrested. I mean, that was the first major development in a long, long time. But obviously that man was arrested and released without charge, and there was a very extensive search went on, but nothing has happened since.
That was a dig, and it kind of wound down after like a huge area of land was searched. Yeah. Those digs are really actually difficult. They're, I've spoken to people working in the arena of geographical profiling and all that, and really they say unless you have an exact, almost specific spot that a body has been buried, like JoJo went missing 30 years ago in November. She was only 21 and she'd spent the evening socialising in Dublin and was hitching down home, a thing of the past maybe. But, the land changes, the ground changes, and even if somebody is buried initially in a shallow grave, the earth kind of moves and the landscape changes as time goes on. That's 3 decades ago. So they do speak about needing quite a small location that they believe there might be a body.
Yeah.
They x-ray the ground and they can see if there's anything underneath it. And of course, if they do find something that appears to be human remains, they will literally do an excavation like archaeologists do. But very disappointing for the family. I suppose that must have given them a ray of hope after all those years. And
look, I mean, it was big news. I mean, Jo Jo Dullard is one of those cases that really sticks in people's minds, probably because, even the fact that it's 1995, it does sort of seem from a bygone era, as you're talking about.
Yeah.
In relation to hitchhiking, it does kind of seem like maybe a simpler time when these things people were less wary of something like this happening. Though, of course, violence has always been a feature in all societies. But the fact that she was a young woman coming home after a night out, the fact that there was clues that she'd spoken to her friend after sort of getting halfway to Kildare and said, I'm going to get a lift the rest of the way. And the fact that she disappeared totally without trace, I suppose, has kept it in the forefront of,
Even that phone call was made from a phone box, which seems quaint now.
Yeah.
And that was at 11:37 on the 9th of November 95, and the phone box was in Moon. She rang her friend Mary Cullinan. Was that, or I feel that was around the time that hitchhiking became something that you stopped doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably was. I think there was obviously a lot of focus then on a number of women who went missing in what was broadly a similar geographic area. That really stuck in the public consciousness as well. I think that changed how people perceived some of these areas, that part of sort of Wicklow and Kildare.
You had Deirdre Jacob, and she was literally vanished without trace from outside her home in Newbridge. When you look at that case of Michael Gain in Kenmare, where he's there one minute and he's gone the next with no trace left behind whatsoever. It's similar. It was always said about Deirdre Jacob, was like she vanished into thin air. That sort of a situation was something you couldn't pre-plan against for, if you know what I mean. And some of the other women that we're talking about, Annie McCarrick was, last seen taking a bus up the Dublin Mountains to go for a walk. Again, it was daylight, it was whatever, but there was something about, and I probably would have been coming up to 20 at that point, there was something about her almost at midnight on a dark road, making a phone call. That was her bit of security. She made the phone call to say she was after getting a lift. They were maybe more innocent times, but that's such a highly dangerous thing to do now when you think about that now. And people were doing that all over the country. I mean, I used to hitchhike. And
so did I. I do remember doing it myself. I know it's different for men, but I mean, it was totally and utterly normal, and people didn't lock their houses at night, in certainly in rural Ireland. I mean, they obviously did in Dublin, but that sort of that hyper consciousness that we have of danger, certainly growing up at those times in the 80s, people never presumed that their children were at risk. I mean, people just didn't think that, did they? They we all got booted out the door in the mornings, and people didn't fear that kind of danger. But I do think that case, and a lot of those cases were discussed as being part of this vanishing triangle, maybe changed the perception of people's safety in parts of rural Ireland. Certainly for women, those cases became very, very, a lot of focus on them.
Now, it was her sister Kathleen that reported her missing the following day, on the Friday the 10th of November. And, given that she had said she was getting into a car and she was on her way home and she was nearly there, obviously that's what spurred that very timely and quick missing person report. Because sometimes you don't see the reports happening for a period of time when police will say, a lot of time is lost.
Yeah.
The quicker they're on the case, the better. But since that time, Kathleen, who passed away 7 years ago, she just tirelessly campaigned for information around her sister ever since that point, and really did give her life to it. And as I said, more recently, I've been speaking to and spending time with Pam O'Loughlin, who was her little sister, Emer, who was only like a child when she actually moved to England, a time gone by as well. She was only a teenager, Pam O'Loughlin, when she went over to live in England to seek work. And she wrote to Emer, and still has the letters that they wrote between them. This is pre-smartphones, and really when actually phone calls used to cost a lot of money, even between England and Ireland. So they did a lot of their correspondence and letter writing. She recalls the day her brother came to see her to say there'd been a fire. Different circumstances, of course, but a mystery nonetheless, because while there was remains found in the fire, it did take a period of time for the police to match the DNA to prove that it was Emer. And then it took another 5 years for the Gardaí to exhume Emer's body and confirm that the cause of death was she was ultimately beheaded with a knife and was killed before that fire. Up until that point, there was this no cause of death and the family were left in limbo. But Pam is really, and you can see the toll it takes on them. I mean, that's a Facebook message that the Dullard family have left in relation to Jo Jo over Easter. And even probably, wording that and putting it up takes a lot out of them.
Yeah, I mean, when you spoke to Pam, and it's obviously all on the Evil Eye podcast, but you can hear even how she has energy for it at times. And then she goes, I think you say, she goes back into her shell again because it takes so much out of her. And she's pushing against doors that have traditionally been quite closed for her. I think one of the bits that stands out is where she had to keep reintroducing herself to the new superintendent, the new local superintendent, who wouldn't know of the case automatically. So these things take a huge toll on people, and certainly in a lot of these cases, these are really ordinary people. They're not sort of media trained people who are, accustomed to dealing with things and being at the centre of these cases. But so it's a hard thing to do. And of course, the other reality is if they don't do it, there is a consequence as well.
It's a burden on them, right?
It is a burden. But the fact is they actually kind of have to do it, don't they? To keep things moving, to keep political interest, to keep Garda interest.
Exactly, and resources going into it. And actually, before we came down here, I was just talking to Emer Rabbit, and she said to me as well, she was thinking of Pam O'Loughlin when she saw the Jo Jo Dullard message. And she was just saying her late sister Mary would often say that she felt like a pest. She felt like she was irritating the Gardaí, and she was this sort of, annoyance really in the case. But actually, the same was said by Pam about how she felt she was perceived by the Gardaí. And of course, there was that very emotional moment when she's told by the former detective superintendent, Christy Mangan, that actually everything she did was right, because had she not been a pest, nothing would have occurred, and they'd be still probably in a position that they had no cause of death. Do these cases ultimately get solved? Of course, the first of our Crime World Presents series is called Beast, and it's on the feed, and it's about one that did get solved, the murder of a lady called Nora Sheehan. It was Ireland's coldest case, and despite the passage of time of nearly 50 years, certainly over 40, maybe 42 years, the suspect was brought to court and he was convicted. No long. He's serving a life sentence for murder. So it can actually ultimately come around. It feels like a lifetime, I'm sure, for the family to wait.
Yeah, I think when you look at the two cases we've discussed, the similarities are obvious. I suppose the differences is certainly in the Emer O'Loughlin case, there's a very, very clear suspect. That suspect's whereabouts is not clear. Obviously, the suspect in the Emer O'Loughlin case is a guy called John Griffin, who was living in a mobile home next to where Emer was staying, and he disappeared out of the country, faked his own suicide, and has been gone, believed to be in moving around Europe for a number of years. The Jo Jo Dullard case, it looked like nothing might ever happen until this arrest occurred. There's been a lot of speculation about that arrest, but ultimately, to bring a murder charge against somebody, you need the DNA evidence. Of course, has allowed a lot of cold cases to be solved around the world, or else you need a witness, and that in part is what Jo Jo's family are calling for. If there's not going to be DNA evidence, and certainly in this case there's no bodies, so that makes it even more difficult. What they're asking for is that witness evidence, and they're asking for people who might have heard of something, who might have known the suspect, who might have been told something back in the day who might now feel more comfortable coming forward and speaking to Gardaí and helping build that extra bit of evidence that they need to bring a case. But of course, the passage of time makes everything just that bit more difficult.
And sometimes it can do the opposite. I mean, there are occasions when people can confess.
Yeah,
as Christy Mangan points out in the Evil Eye podcast. Just funny, while we're still on JoJo, the family, in the aftermath of the December searches and the arrest, they and this kind of gives us an insight into how emotionally draining these things can be, the peaks and troughs of these investigations, and then being left feeling empty still and nothing. And they said it's been an extremely emotional, difficult last few weeks. We're heartbroken. We'd hoped we would have JoJo home for Christmas. Unfortunately, that did not happen. For people who've information, please spare a thought for JoJo this Christmas. While you're enjoying time with your family, ours is still not complete. JoJo is still alone out there, waiting to be found and brought home to her family. It's never too late to come forward. The investigation is still ongoing, and they like to thank An Garda Síochána for their continued hard work. In the case of Emer O'Loughlin, I think ultimately the point of doing the podcast and the reason that Pam O'Loughlin has given us so much of our time is in the hopes that somebody out there will know where John Griffin is. We've had a few tip-offs in since the podcast launched last week, and it is only a week still running, so there's plenty more episodes to come. A new one was released on Tuesday, and every Tuesday there will be a new episode released for 8 episodes. But ultimately it's to try and reach out with that story into this sort of expat community out there, possibly in Europe, but possibly still focused in the Scotland area where he had initially bedded down within a transient sort of community. If he's out there, obviously Pam's request is, and she has a Facebook page dedicated to Emer O'Loughlin, all our DMs and our, Crime World emails are open. That's crimeworld@sundayworld.com email, and my personal DMs, Niall's personal DMs, and all our own social media on Crime World is open between Instagram and Twitter and everything else. X, bit like you with the pounds.
Like X, yeah.
Get used to that, calling it X. But anyway, and it's really just an appeal for anybody who knows the whereabouts of John Griffin to just get in contact anonymously if they do wish to do so, and to try and give Pam a little bit of comfort after all these years of trying to hunt him down and keep the investigation alive. There's an awful lot more cases like this, but, when you see the families reaching out like this, they're doing a lot of good. And ultimately, if these cases are solvable, it'll be because of their hard work and obviously the work of the Gardaí involved in them. But it's just really on them such a heavy burden to carry for the ongoing future until something breaks on the case.
Yeah, I think it's very hard for families to move on without a body, and
without justice, yeah.
And without justice, and without some sort of, like, closure is a bit of a cliched term.
It is a bit.
But, however, I still think there is, certainly when you're talking about cases like this, probably closure isn't a terrible word, that it doesn't allow them to move forward, because they're always focused on that lack of finality in terms of a suspect coming to court. So I do think it's closure, people throw that word around about everything.
No, it is, because I suppose that they have, it's what that might mean is that the family member who has done all the work around keeping the case alive may feel that they've done enough, or they have finally done enough, either by the discovery of remains or by the hunting down of a suspect, or whatever the situation may be. But it is that sort of sense of peace within them that they have done all they can do.
Yeah, and they kind of get stuck in that moment because there isn't because they need that answer, and they need to continue to push it. So it is really, really difficult, and we see that just across all cases like this, that people get trapped in that moment, I suppose, or get trapped in trying to they have to keep trying to go, I suppose. So it's certainly your heart would go out to them.
Those two cases, I suppose, just to give out the Garda confidential line, 1-800-666-111. And the Jo Jo Dullard case has been handled by Naas Garda Station, and the Emer O'Loughlin murder inquiry is been handled by Gorse Garda Station. And also the families have their own personal Facebook sites that you can message anonymously, and they will take that information and bring it forward themselves. So we'll leave that for the moment. Thanks, Niall.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.